Hello everyone. Today we will talk about the joints. This is chapter 9. So it's very important to know joints because you will see patients, whether you are a nurse or in exercise science or physiotherapy, you will see a lot of patients coming with the problems in their joints, like ankle sprains, for example, or other types of joint problems. Uh, Very briefly, we can define a joint as any place that where two bones are coming together, either two bones or bone and cartilage coming together. This is also called articulation. And as we understand, joints should allow, or usually they allow movement between the bones, but sometimes other joints are designed for stability and therefore they don't allow any type of movement for these bones. Now, the way we can classify joints based on two things. Uh, the first one, either the amount of mobility, how far they can move, how far they can allow the bones to move from each other, and therefore this is like a functional classification. You need to know this functional classification. And here we have three types of joints. So, first type is called synarthrosis. Synarthrosis or immobile joint. These they don't allow any type of movement. We'll see some examples. Then the second type is something called amphiarthrosis or slight movable joint. So this allow very limited movement. Amphi in general it means like of both kinds, so this is like in between. And the third type is something called diarthrosis. Diarthrosis, this is a freely movable joint which is allowing wide range of movement. The diarthrosis joint. So this is the functional classification. Then the other type of classification is something called structural classification, and here it's about, technically it's about the material that is between the bones or filling the joints. So if there is really a space between the two bones or not. Okay, so there is this space between the bones. What type of material is filling this space, and whether they are this space is like allowing the two bones to come together or no, there will be a gap between them. And in this case we have three types of structural classification. The first one is the fibrous connective tissue, the second one is the cartilage, and the third one is something like we will have a cavity that is filled with fluid. This is something called synovial joints, and we will talk about all of this in this chapter. So for the fibrous joint, so basically we are going to use the structural classification. Okay, and the first one is the fibrous joint. Fibrous, as you are familiar with the word now, it means there is a fibrous connective tissue, and this fibrous connective tissue is filling the joint. So these are directly connected to each other. The bones are directly connected to each other, and they are connected by a fibrous connective tissue. This joint is immovable. It does not allow any type of movement between the bones. So this is like fixed joint. We have three types, sutures, and another thing called, or the second type is syndesmosums, and the third type is something called gomphoses. Sutures, you have seen it, it's in the skull, between the bones of the skull. Syndesmosums, this is between, for example, the radius and the ulna in the hand or between the tibia and the fibula. Between the tibia and the fibula in the leg. And the third type is the gymphosis between the tooth or the teeth and the maxilla or the mandible in the jaw. Okay, so this is the three types. So these are the fibrous joints. What I need you just to know their names and the example of them. For the cartilaginous joint, this is the second type. Here we have cartilage within the joint. So the material that is filling that space between the bones is cartilage. There is no joint cavity, and here most of the time it's hyaline cartilage. Sometimes there are fibrocartilage. And these types of joints, they are not highly movable. So they are allowing limited range of movement. They are allowing limited range of movement. And here we have two types. The first type is something called synochondrosis. Syno, it means connected. So it's, and chondrosis, it's like cartilage. So here it's connected with cartilage. That's the name. Here the bones are connected by hyaline cartilage, and all of these synoarthrotic joints are immovable. So they don't allow any type of movement between the bones. An example is the epiphyseal plate. This is a type of joint since it's connecting like two different bones together. So this is the synochondrosis. The second type of cartilaginous joints is something called symphysis. These are bones connected by fibrocartilage. This is one type of three types of cartilages we have in our body. So this is fibrocartilages. So these bones are very strong, and these are amphiarthrotic joints, meaning they are allowing a slight movement between the bones. So this is the, like an example, like the one in the pubic symphysis. Another example is the intervertebral disc, the one between the vertebra and the vertebral column. So these two types are symphysis. These are fibrocartilage joint, and both are amphiarthrotic. So I will stop here, go over this, and when we come back, we will resume talking about the synovial joint.